Hello, everybody. Elida Zweidler-McKay with ZM Coach, where we're all about helping you take your career to the next level, whether that's moving up in your current organization, building your leadership skills, building your skills for managing up so that you can be successful in your current role or finding a new role somewhere else. So today I want to talk to you about this funny trade-off that we see people talk about all the time around, should we be looking out for the people on our team or should we be looking out for the bottom line? If you are a manager of any sort, you have certainly faced this dilemma throughout your time as a manager. On the one hand, you've got a team of people who have very real, very human needs. They may have situations going on in their health, in their families, in their households that they have to deal with, and you want to be empathetic and supportive and understand what's happening for them as whole people. But at the same time, you've got real business outcomes that you have to accomplish, and you've got goals that have been set for you and goals that you've set for them, so that you can meet the needs of the organization that's actually paying for their paycheck. So which do you prioritize? What do you do? Well, if you've listened to me for any period of time, or if you've worked with me, you know that one of the guiding principles that I use in my work is this idea of polarities, and that as a manager, most of what you face day to day isn't actually a solvable problem, but a polarity that you have to manage. And this is based on the work of Barry Johnson and others. And that trade-off between looking out for the people and looking out for the bottom line is a polarity. There's no right answer. You can't do one and not do the other. They're interdependent. And what I mean by interdependent is that, if you're only looking out for the bottom line and you ignore the people, you will lose people, and that will slow down your productivity because you'll have to spend time hiring and training and getting new people up to speed. And so not looking out for your people and only looking out for the bottom line will actually eventually cause a crash in your bottom line. Same thing if you, over lean to the other side and you're only taking care of your people and you're making all these exceptions and you're not paying attention to what people actually need to get done for the organization and for the goals of the organization, eventually the organization will not be able to sustain itself, and you'll end up having to lay people off, and it won't be good for the people either. That's what I mean by a polarity. It's where you've got these two interdependent ideas that you have to manage both in order to be effective. So I think this question of do I look out for the people or do I look out for the bottom line is kind of a fake question because there's no real answer to that. The answer is yes, both. And so I think it's one of the biggest challenges that managers face is what do I do in the face of this kind of a dilemma? And it's hard. I mean, I know from the clients that I'm coaching, and I know from people just in my life that particular trade-off is especially hard and has gotten harder and harder, through the pandemic and since the pandemic, as people are trying to manage questions like, should I allow my staff to be able to work from home or do I need them in the office? Where you're managing another trade-off that has to do with flexibility for the individual versus the need for collective information sharing and connection. There are just all these different trade-offs that need to be made. And so one of the things that's really helpful is to have a way to think about that where you're really moving into this more polarity thinking. And instead of seeing it as an either or, you're really moving into how do I do both? So how do I make sure that I am focused on the bottom line, focused on what we need for the business, focused on our goals and outcomes, and taking care of my people? And what would it look like if I did too much of one or too much of the other? What would be the early warning signs that I was maybe being a little too lax with my team and letting deadlines slip, or that I was maybe too focused on the deadlines, the bottom line, and not giving enough attention to my team? What would be some of my early warning signs? Well, on the second one, too focused on the bottom line, one early warning sign would be people leaving, or this quiet quitting that we keep talking about, that people feel demotivated because they feel like their needs don't matter, or that you're only looking out for the business and not for them. On the other hand, the sign that you're paying too much attention to individual circumstances and maybe not enough to the bottom line might be some real slips in deadlines or in productivity. And if you've got your eye on those kinds of early warning signs, that can be a way to really help you skate down the middle on that particular issue and find this kind of middle ground where you can do both and really pay attention to both. So just want to raise that to your attention, that there are an awful lot of things that get set up as either ors in organizations and in our minds, because we're wired to think that way, that aren't really either ors at all, that we have to manage in a really balanced way. And of course, you know this if you've thought about it at all, but it's easy in the moment to moment specifics to forget that. So I'm just here to remind you of that so that you can start to bring that into the way that you think about these trade-offs and the way that you manage them. And then the other thing, to be paying attention to there is having that conversation with the people around you so that you're not holding the polarity by yourself and still trying to please the people who want all this flexibility or your boss who wants all these deadlines, but you're really having that conversation with them about the trade-offs that you see and the polarities that need to be managed. So what I mean by that is, imagine the conversation with your team members if instead of just ruling on their question of, can I take tomorrow off or not, you engage them in the conversation about this polarity. Like, I really want to support you taking the week off next week. And we've got this really important deadline the week after. And so, how can we solve this problem of you being away right before this important deadline and still get the work done? What would that have to look like? Maybe you say, look, I can't allow it this time because there's not enough notice for us to do something about this deadline. But going forward, I'd love to honor your request to take time off. And the way to do that is going to be for the two of us to figure out how we can make sure we're still meeting our deadlines even as you take the time off. Do you see what I mean? So instead of holding that polarity inside yourself, you can build a culture with your team where you start to bring the dilemma to the team and get them to manage it with you, which, you may still hold on to the final decision about it, but you can engage people in that conversation, and that gets them to own the trade-offs so that it's not just all on you. Same goes for your boss. Okay, I know you want to set this deadline really tight so we keep everybody on track and we keep people moving forward toward it. But can you help me think about how we can keep people from feeling discouraged when the goal feels so unattainable to them? What are your ideas about that? So you can start to engage your boss in how do we manage both the people side and the deadline side in a useful way. And a lot of people don't realize that you can do that kind of thing with your boss. You feel them making unreasonable requests, or your boss's boss, or wherever it is. You feel like you get what feels like an unreasonable request and you get upset about it. And then you feel like there's no way you can talk about it with them because you're going to come across as criticizing or like you're not a team player. But usually there's a way to have that conversation where you're raising it as questions or you're raising it as an inquiry rather than telling them they're wrong or telling them that they're not thinking about the whole thing. That you can sort of get yourself into partnership with them to think through the problem. And they may have some ideas that you haven't thought of, or they may see it in a different way than you do that would help solve it. Or you're asking the questions might be a light bulb moment for them where you're seeing something they're not. And that's the real power of partnership. And that's one of the things that I work with my clients on, is how do you create that sense of partnership up, down, and sideways in the organization so that you're not holding on to those dilemmas by yourself. You're really engaging other people in those conversations, which makes you a more effective leader and makes you a more effective team player because you're bringing what you see to the table in a way that other people can take it in. So that's a lot of ground we've covered today, but some of the takeaways are to think about whether what you're looking at is one of these unsolvable interdependent polarities, and then how to engage other people in holding that dilemma with you so that you're not the one stuck in the middle with, people on this side of you holding this side of the polarity and people on that side of you holding the other. We teach very specific skills for how to do this in our coaching work. When it arises with clients and their situations, we have very specific frameworks and tools that we bring in and that we work with so that you can really effectively navigate that middle ground and get other people engaged with you. So if that's something that's of interest to you, I encourage you to reach out to me. You can speak with a member of my team to see if we would be a good fit to work together. If we are, we'll tell you that. We'll talk about what that could look like. If we're not, we'll tell you that too. We'll see if we can point you to some other resources. But either way, getting on the phone with us is an opportunity for you to take a next step in your career, to find out what's available to you in terms of resources and support, and to see where you want to go next. So you can book a call with us at zmcoach.com/apply. We look forward to hearing from you. Take care.